University. On behalf of Dayanand Sagar University and BITES, it is my honor to welcome our speaker, Sri Rangarajan TS Sir, Associate Vice President Council for RFID. I heartily welcome all the members. I request Dr. P.C. Deshmukh Sir, Dean, Science and Humanities, Dayanand Sagar University, to please introduce Sri Rangarajan TS Sir to our participants.
Thank you very much, Yasma, and a very hearty welcome to everybody over here, especially to our esteemed speaker, Sri Professor Rangarajan. Wonderful to have you with us, Professor Rangarajan. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, sir.
And it is a great privilege for the Board of Information Technology Education Standards and the Dayanand Sagar University to have such a distinguished personality amongst us this afternoon. Indeed, the pandemic has precipitated a very unforeseen situation, which has made it necessary to adapt to different teaching and learning methods. But even independent of the pandemic, the way technology has been changing so rapidly over the last several years, and it has thrown up new challenges and new opportunities. And it could not be that we could have thought about a better speaker than Professor Rangarajan to speak about contemporary um teaching methods and to reach out globally in a holistic manner. And this is his area of specialty. He's a management consultant and information technology consultant. And we are really privileged to have you, sir, for the distinguished guest lecture this afternoon. And uh, the expertise of Professor Rangarajan spread over very many different domains. Means he has been the enterprise risk officer for as many as 8 verticals. He has been a long-standing contributor to the IEEE events, which he has contributed to over several decades, and consultant with the Tata services for a long time, visiting faculty at the Triple IT, fellow of the Institute of Management Consultants of India. He has many credits, many feathers in his cap. He is a board member of several universities, elected executive council member of major institutions, and it's a great privilege to have Mr. Professor Rangarajan with us. He is also um an outstanding human personality. He's a very good singer. He's an avid follower of cricket, speaks many language, and I will let him now speak to us in a language which we will definitely enjoy and understand. Over to you, Professor Rangarajan.
Thank you, Professor. I'm very thankful to my ex-colleague Arvind who introduced me to BITES and Professor Murthy for following up so quickly. And this is a presentation that I first prepared in the month of May of 2020 during the pandemic. Actually, I had gone for a meeting to Panama City in February last year. And on my way back, I wanted to visit my son, and I got stuck because of COVID there. So when I felt that I had a lot of time at my hands, and I enrolled into the public library there and learned a few languages. That was when some of my contacts in the academia, they approached me to take a webinar because everybody was at home. They were desperately looking for speakers. So I thought I should actually create a new area where I can share some of the perspectives I gathered on teaching and learning, because that was something that the faculty were probably going to benefit most. In fact, I had taken a course as a teacher in Triple IT Srirangam, which gave me a sort of a good appreciation of all the types of tasks that a teacher has to do. This I did for three batches of postgraduate students between 2014 and 2016. Of course, I was visiting academia several years. I spoken at IIM Code in many other places. But that was the one which really gave me a good understanding of an Indian teacher's problems and opportunities that they come across. So I thought I will focus on that. I did some research and I put together all my thoughts and all that I was studying at that time and created this presentation. It got a good appreciation from people, and it got sort of viral among the teachers. So I had to repeat it for almost 6 times to different audiences, ranging from about 80 to 100 participants to something like 1,500 participants at a time. So when Arvind approached me, I thought I have something very canned and ready. I can update that and share it with this audience. He thought that it would be a good idea. So here I am, coming to you with the same presentation, but slightly updated with the current things. One of the things that I have learned in my long career is that we must always, working in a private organization, we are very, very conscious of our customers. So we must first get some kind of a feedback from people about what they think about the subjects that we are going to cover, or how they view the whole area. So I requested permission from Professor Murthy to circulate a questionnaire, and I'm happy to say that I had some 17 odd responses for that questionnaire. I'll quickly share with you the findings of that, the survey results, because I think there are plenty of slides covering that survey results, because I really want to talk more about the subject that I wanted to do this. So let's see one by one. The first question was, what is the teaching method? Are you able to see the slides?
Yes,
Yes,
sir. Yes.
Yes, sir.
yes,
Slides are easy.
yes. Please go ahead. It's very clearly visible.
So this is the first slide where I asked about the teaching method, the pedagogy that people use most in the classes today. And you can see that there were 12 responses for PowerPoint slides, 11 for video-based instruction, then chalk and talk and web-based teaching. The next one was on whether you use a textbook-based teaching or a case study or notes or activity. And people said that, most of them said they use activity-based teaching, perhaps because the, the audience is all IT people and they must be actually coding and programming. So that's the activity probably they refer to. The next one was, what would you like to know in the session? So this is an important thing, because there are diverse views about what people want to know, and it's very difficult to summarize that. So I still felt that it is interesting to see that most of the people were interested in learning how learning itself has changed, and that's the core point that I want to talk about today. Teaching will come next after that. Of course, a few people felt that how COVID has affected them. Perhaps they have heard others speak about this, or how teaching is done in other countries and so on. So next question was, are learning and teaching different? An overwhelming response about how learning and teaching are very, very different. This is surprising to me, because they are both learning and teaching are so interconnected that if you can't learn, you can't teach. And if you can't teach, then you can't learn also. So they are so interconnected, but people felt they are very different. Is learning a skill that can be taught? 50% people say that they can't. Learning is a skill that cannot be taught. That is also very interesting because from the perspective that I'm going to share, I think there is some truth to this whole thing about learning, which we will see. What is easier to teach? People felt reading, writing, and arithmetic, everything can be taught. Now, here also there is a dispute that I will share with you when I come up to the examples. This is an example directly from TCS. We had an adult literacy program which actually goes against the grain of what is being projected here. So I'm sure by now most of you would have understood that many things that you have as perspectives are likely to be disrupted in this session. Have you ever heard carried out the learning assessment test? People say that yes, they are carrying it out regularly. I would encourage you to do this regularly because in today's dynamic world, things are changing very, very, very fast. And last year, nobody was anticipating that COVID will disrupt our whole teaching learning process. And it has done. People have learned. People have changed. Expectations have changed so much so that I believe there is a lot of fatigue that is setting in with all these online education. Does learning reduce with age? People feel no, doesn't reduce with age. That's the majority opinion. And I think it's true. And for this, I want to tell you something very interesting that I came across recently. Uh, what do you think are the two most metabolically expensive functions of our body? Suppose you don't exert yourself and you just, let's say you are sitting or you are just walking. What are the two most important metabolically expensive functions that the body performs? And I found that I learned that the two functions are moving and learning. They consume the maximum energy that your body, takes in. So that's a very interesting thing because as you keep learning and grow older and older, you probably have a much better quality of life. Can teaching be taught? Most people feel yes, it can be taught. Again, we find that there are several examples of great teachers who are self-taught, who have some knack. And in fact, I was doing a study in IIT Madras a few years ago, and the teachers there, they swore that teachers are born. They swore that nobody can teach teaching. There are some teachers who cannot be replaced. Everybody can be a learner, but teachers are very difficult to find. Are good learners born or made? People felt both. I thought, well, the jury is out here. I don't know exactly whether good learners are born or made. I think it makes a lot of difference if you are a good learner because then you have the chance of adapting yourself much faster to changes in the world. Are good teachers born or made? Again, I think both. People are not sure about whether teachers are born or made. However, there are different opinions. So most of this feedback is very, conflicting or contradictory. I'm not sure how many people will agree with this, but this is what the results of the survey show. What proportion of your time is spent on administrative tasks? People were very clear that 50% of their time is spent on administration, which according to me is very high. I think if you allow people to teach or learn and not burden them with these kinds of tasks, their process of learning and teaching will be greatly enhanced. Even if you take us, as students, if our parents were not there and not taking care of us, we would be spending most of our time and energy in subsisting and not in keep learning. So when you are a kid, you are not saddled with all the administrative tasks of the house, and therefore you are able to focus on learning. And that's the same thing that a teacher also needs. He needs an environment which does not impose too much of administrative tasks on them. Will the use of technology reduce your time and effort in administrative tasks? Overwhelming, yes. And that is something which I'm sure most of you are aware that there are plenty of examples of how technology today is replacing administrative effort. Lastly, what do you find most difficult in teaching? People were sort of equally balanced about keeping myself abreast with development, managing the class and students, administrative work, time and priority management, and so on. So if you really look at the summary of responses, most people say that they are using PowerPoint, video, talk and talk in that order. They're using activity-based or case-based pedagogy, and they are keen to know about how teaching is done in other countries or how it has been impacted due to COVID. My own observations about teachers based on this survey and even otherwise is that I think today's teacher is loaded with a lot of administrative tasks and responsibilities. And the more we relieve a teacher from these tasks, the better would be the output, both in terms of quality and quantity from the teacher. Today's teacher has to confront mega changes and challenges in education and employment landscapes. There are, uh, these, many of the colleges today are closing down courses. People are disenchanted with engineering in India, and many changes are happening in the recent past. So these are changes which people have to adapt to. The teacher also has to often deal with more aware and resourceful students. This is a recent occurrence in the past about a decade when everybody seems to have a mobile and everybody is connected to internet and everybody is connected to their own colleagues and so on. So they are able to access information faster, and the teacher has to deal with a crowd of students who probably are much better aware. So you have to be very careful about what you talk to them. The teacher is also strapped for time and resources to cope with these mega changes. So it is a very tough job. I think that is something that all of us can accept. But the job of the teacher today has become very, very tough with so many changes that have occurred. I heard an interesting thing in the online teaching that many of the students have their parents watching them learn, and the parents finding fault and adding to the woes of the teacher, questioning the teacher. So the teacher is at the receiving end of the short stick. That is something that I thought was an important observation to make. The teacher also has to deal with increasing and even unreasonable demands of the institutions and regulators because of certification, with all this NAC accreditation, AICT accreditation, and so on, that they have to comply with those things to be able to get affiliation and recognition. And there are new bodies which are emerging, which say claim to provide you access to bigger markets and so on. And finally, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and there are multiple ways that institutions need to look at technology to help resolve most of the issues that a teacher is facing today. These are some of the observations I thought I'd share with you quickly. So let's look at some of the examples that I wanted to share here. These are interesting and important examples. So how has learning changed? So the learning has changed when people are able to abstract, data or abstract information and come to certain conclusions based on information. I remember when I started my career in TCS about 3 decades ago, We used to go and sell computerization to our clients. And most of the people used to argue with us, what is the use of this computer? I have so skilled people available to me. Why should I invest this money? And then, the next question would be that if I bring computers, so many people will lose jobs and so on. And most of the people did not appreciate the value of how their decisions should be driven by data. Today, it is a given. I think almost everyone here understands the value of data. And you can see in Twitter and WhatsApp, and when people send you some forwards, the first thing people want to know is to do a fact check. They want to find out whether this is a published source. They want to find out whether such a thing happened. So everybody questions the origin and source of any WhatsApp forward or a Twitter post. And so it is sort of becoming the new normal that you are not going to convince someone without data. So the age of the belief is slowly giving away to the age of reason. So some of the examples that I want to share with you here is this first example, which was very interesting to me. It was actually I learned it when I was doing my post graduation. There was a professor called Robert Solow from MIT who published a paper in 1957 in the Journal of Economics and Statistics. The paper was on the use of the Cobb-Douglas production function, and using that function, that professor wanted to know which factor of productivity, whether it was labor or capital, which contributed to an increase in the standard of living of society. When he wanted to check this, he compiled a lot of data, and he used an IBM machine in those days to compile that data and really try to figure out what exactly was happening. So the Cobb-Douglas production function is basically as a product of the labor and capital with their elasticities as the power. So he differentiated that equation, and then he tried to find out what is the contribution of labor and capital to increase in standard of living. He found that both of them put together were responsible only for about 12% of the increase in standard of living of the society. 88% came from a constant, which it took him quite some time to understand that the constant was nothing but technology. He realized that the standard of living of a society or a country is very much dependent, much more dependent on technology than labor and capital. This was a very important inference which was available to us as way back as 1957. But guess who used it? It was used by Japan. The Japanese people picked up this paper, they made it the cornerstone of their policy, and they created MITI, the Ministry of Industry and Trade, etc., and Investment. And then they sent hordes of Japanese on state-funded tours across the world. Since from 1950s, after Japan was bombed in the World War II and it was sort of flattened, they started this whole exercise of rebuilding Japan. These hordes of Japanese, they went to every developed country and they scored for what is happening in those countries, and they wanted to really learn what was going on and bring it back to their country to develop their country. So there are so many examples, like the Casio LCD and the Walkman, the Sony camera. All these are products of this kind of scoring. But Japan focused all its effort on technology, and a small island nation, which was basically a warrior country which lost in a war, which could have remained like that. But they really changed this with this one paper, the Cobb Douglas production function, defined by Robert Solow. Now, this is how really, learning changes the way a society functions, how quickly it adapts, what it creates. And after that, we have so many examples now of how learning is changing things. Now, let's look at another interesting point. This was a point which, again, it happened in one of my meetings in TCS, where there was a debate about what is the difference between knowledge and skill. So here the example that I want to share with you is the difference between a medical doctor of medicine and a medical master of surgery. The way knowledge works is the doctor, it's a person who is who prescribes medicine is called a doctor of medicine, which means that he is a knowledge oriented person. Whereas when it comes to surgery, you need skill. So if you are a skilled person, you are a master. They don't really call you a doctor, but they call you a master because you have mastered the skill of doing something. This is another fine difference when we talk about how we work in the IT industry, where somebody is a consultant who knows many things, and somebody is actually a good programmer or a coder or somebody who's very skilled in some of the languages, the structures, and how to use a machine well. So this is another thing that I wanted to share with you in terms of learning. The next example is about PhD. This is something which I learned in my school, in my college. I had a professor who used to teach us machine design. He did his MTech in IIT Bombay, and when he was doing that program, he used to find that in the canteen, a person used to come and sit all by himself in a corner table and never talk to anyone. A very morose, very what I call aloof. So they were also very scared to talk to him. They watched him for about 6 months like that. And after about 7 or 8 months, one day they found that this man who had a big beard and who was quite unkempt had suddenly come to the canteen very fresh, clean shaven, very happy, smiling. And then he had instructed the canteen fellows that today the whole meal is on me. Everybody gets treated like a king. And he was very
Rangarajan sir, you're not audible. Sir is facing some network connectivity. Sir will get back shortly. Sir, you're not audible at all, Rangarajan, sir. Good afternoon. Sir has some network connectivity issue. Sir will be joining back shortly. Kindly bear with us. Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Yeah, I
Sir,
don't
are
know
you
how
able
it.
to? Yes, sir. So
Okay.
can you share your screen, please?
Is the screen visible now?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Okay. So can anybody tell me where they lost me?
So
Hello?
story of a PhD.
Okay. So is this was the story of the PhD over or?
It was going on, sir, when we could not hear you.
Okay. So the Academy of Sciences in Soviet Union, they said that we will give PhD to a person who establishes that he has a scientific way of solving a problem, and if he publishes something, it can be trusted. So that's how they define the PhD. So this is another type of learning that not everybody can know everything, but if a person has the right approach to learn, a right method of learning, right way of inquiring, right curiosity, then they are able to convince whatever they say, people will be able to trust. Recently, there was an article about Apple's chairman Tim Cook's observations on China. He said that in 1995, Apple went to China and they found that the Chinese people were able to, they were quite skilled. They were able to do a lot of work that they at a much lower price. And recently, when they went, he was able to find some 1 million programmers in a football field. So the scale in which they were creating skills which were relevant to, you know, writing code for their AirPods, writing miniaturized, embedded systems. It's not available anywhere in the world. So much as they would like to have somebody else, nobody can beat China because they kept pace with the latest technology. So when we talk about skill and knowledge, they also have to be very current. They have to be keeping pace with the changes that are happening. You can't say that I have very good bullock cart drivers and therefore I am very skilled. You need people who can drive a metro. They can have pilots who can fly you in a helicopter. So that skill change is something very important. So learning is something which has to be current and contemporary. I had am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're
Okay.
audible.
So about 3 decades ago I had an opportunity to go to Taiwan. uh, we were doing a project for setting up the techno park in Kerala, and I had a very senior advisor from the Tata Group along with me. So we had a host in Taiwan who asked us a very interesting question. He said, "We are very surprised, in China, in Taiwan, in Japan, in Korea, we've all become. I mean, lot of investment has gone into our hardware business. But it's surprising thing that a very poor country like India has become the software superpower of the world. It's become the back office for the world. How did people achieve this? What is it that you guys have done differently that no other country has been able to do so well in software as India?" Actually, it was very interesting. I mean, the way they posed this question. So I asked them, how you tell me how Taiwan became a hardware superpower. And then they said that no Taiwanese wants to work for another Taiwanese. Everybody is an entrepreneur. So a person will actually migrate from a village. Then he will start working as a worker, as a labor in some factory. He will learn how to make those parts. The first thing he will do with the savings for that month or two of his work will be to buy a machine, put it in his backyard, teach his family members to work on the machine. His grandmother, his mother, father, his kids, his sister, dog, his friend, everybody, they will learn this. And then they will produce that same product at a much lower price, undercut his supplier, his boss, and then sell. So this is how Taiwanese entrepreneurs grew. And I'm talking of 1990 when they had a foreign exchange surplus of some $68 billion. And India was actually trying to sell its gold to IMF. That was the kind of situation that the countries have gone through. Of course, my answer was very simple. I think India became a software superpower because Indians know English. I mean, other Chinese, Japanese, Koreans, they don't know English. So they were not able to get their customer to speak to the customer and get the requirements for them to come back and code. So that was the answer that I had. But all said and done, I think it is very important to be able to capitalize an opportunity that you have contemporary skills and contemporary knowledge. The contemporary knowledge and skills are something which can be acquired only when the learning process is very contemporary. Look at how the coronavirus a vaccine was made. It was made within 2 days of the virus genome map being published. So within 2 days of the genome map being published, the vaccination was available. The vaccine was available. The vaccine was actually printed, okay, using the CRISPR methodology. The way they did that was that even before the virus reached Europe, the vaccine was actually ready. But it took 1 year of testing, 1 year of field trials, randomized controlled trials, 1 year of approvals, certifications, and so on for it to be released. But the design and the technology was so simple, I mean, so easily done because they had contemporary tools. Even today, if you see the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine are based on a protocol which has been designed using a CRISPR machine. It was published 3 years ago in their website. But the other vaccine people were not willing to take that risk. And of course, there are some constraints with those vaccines in terms of temperature, etc. But the fact is that technology, as it keeps improving, our skills and our knowledge has to keep pace with it. And unless we create a scalable environment of such learning, we won't be able to become competitive in the world. That's the bottom line. The last point is about the San Jose Public Library, which is my personal experience. That I think in India we need libraries like that. We need people, societies to be attached to a library. If you go to a library in America, you can see that right in the morning from 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock, it is full. People are just using the library as their second home. Whether you are a retired person or you are a young student, or and there are sections for different age groups, and it's just fully stocked. It has got some of the latest features. I was able to become a free member. They had an application called Libby. You install it in your iPad or your mobile. You can borrow 10 books from the library on the Libby. It will be available to you for some 3 weeks or so. So after that, the book will vanish, whether you have read it or not. But it's become so accessible that, and reading has become such an habit. I don't see that happening in our country. I mean, I don't think people are so sensitized to using libraries. We're not really fixed on that. Of course, I want to quickly go through this because I think we're running short of time. Somebody asked about learning management systems. I have used, I mean, in TCS, we had a learning management system called Sabha or something, and we used it for many of the skills that we were teaching. But in my class in Triple IT Srirangam, I used a tool called Piazza. So I was not able to take the class during weekdays because I had to work. So I went on weekends, and when I went on weekends, it was difficult for me to remember the faces of the 40 odd students. And if I had to really take one course and really evaluate each one of them, their internal work, and set the question paper, etc., I really had to know those people by name and by face. So I used this tool called Piazza. I found that the San Jose Public Library also uses Piazza. So here in Piazza, I was able to interact with the students, even when we were not physically in touch. Of course, today there are so many tools. I mean, I'm talking of about 7, 8 years back. So I'm giving you some links. You can check out these links of all that learning management systems. And such systems reduce a lot of administrative tasks for the teachers. That's why I'm suggesting this. This is the example of the San Jose State University using Piazza and other things. You can check out this example. Now, I want to also tell you about another interesting thing that I noticed in Tyagaraja College of Engineering, Madurai. So I was at that time, I think, visiting them on behalf of IEEE Madras section as the chair, and the HOD of the computer science. She took me around the campus. showed me what they were doing. So they started this sometime in 2002 or 2003. What they did was they embraced open source. And what they did was they created a hierarchy of students for projects. So the final year students were the owners of the system. The third year students were the developers. The second year students were the programmers or whatever. So they created a hierarchy, and then they picked up one by one exam, some applications to build. So, for example, they created an application for the mess in their hostel canteen. Then they created an application for the library. They created an attendance system. So they wrote. So these became projects for final year students, fourth year and final, third and final year students. And these projects were then implemented in the campus. And when the students left, wherever in the world they are, they still own the system. If there is a bug in the system, it will get posted in the notice board. It will go to that guy will go and fix that bug. So they, like that, they created a slew of projects within the campus, and it was actually grouped into what is called as a campus management system. So on the one hand, they were able to create projects for their students. On the other hand, the college was able to benefit by reducing the administrative work of their staff. And it keeps on going, and it's all open source based. They bring new tools that come in open source and integrate it with the system. That is a phenomenal example, I thought. They solved their problem, they used the students, they created projects, everything was done in house. I thought this is an example that most colleges can follow. Of course, there are tools like Gradient, and ETS. Now, of course, TCS also uses Ion to testing and services. Gradient is an assignment management system which is used in Stanford University, and there are many tools which have come in education. Which, if you are keen, you can really use them to reduce your administrative tasks and non-value adding tasks. Of course, there are a lot of online courses also now, so you can actually sort of subcontract or create it as a prerequisite. If somebody wants to, let's say, work on an ML Python programming, you should have the basic requirement of having studied probability and statistics and so on and so forth. And they can go to Khan Academy, learn that, use Baidu and so on, and then come prepared. For example, I run a hackathon in the college, and I find that if the student does not know basic coding, etc., what is the use of running the hackathon? So you create a minimum set of prerequisites. So most of the colleges in the US, at least, they create a clear prerequisite. You can't join a course unless you've got those prerequisites approved. So you define those prerequisites and subcontract, and that for that you can use all the online courses. Now let's come to teaching. Some new things that I noticed in teaching. C.K. Prahlad was a management guru, and this is something that he said once. He said that when he was teaching in University of Michigan, he made it a point that at the end of the semester every year, he will personally burn all his notes. He will just bring all his notes of that session, create a bonfire and burn them. So that next semester, if he has to take a course, he will have to study afresh. So he will sit down and the only thing that is available to him is his memory. The rest of things he has to do that hard work of preparing. And that is the kind of effort that a teacher is, good teachers will probably put, because they will learn every semester themselves afresh, and then they will teach. And the only thing they have in the back, if they have taught the same course several times, they will have a lot of residual memory of that, but they will also learn new things to teach. So this is something that I thought I will share with you. Second thing was one of the things I noticed about professors. I am familiar with Stanford University because my son studied there. So what they do, what the professors do is their job is only to identify the syllabus for the next year, next semester, which is not an easy task. Here I sit in the board of some of these academic institutions, and it seems to be more of a routine. And everybody claims that we are governed by or constrained by UGC, constrained by AICT. We can't do this, we can't do that, and then we do some syllabus here, jugglery, and come out. That's not the way course syllabus is made in these institutes abroad. The professor's job is to identify what needs to be taught so that their students are having contemporary skills required by the industry. So most of the new courses or new subjects that they create, it's the professor who has to decide and who's responsible for it. They don't stop with just creating the syllabus. They have to create a faculty development program. They have to equip their labs. They have to get all the infrastructure required to teach, and they have to be ready to teach that those courses required by the industry or required by research or required by whatever, based on what the professors have found. Since the professors are very busy trying to figure out what the syllabus is, they have outsourced their teaching tasks to their teaching assistant and the research assistant. So on the one hand, their research is going on with their assistant, the teaching is also standardized. But all the new thing that uncertainty that the teacher has to handle is handled by the professor. That I thought is something which is quite missing in our country. I think here people seem to be following the courses. I was stunned to find that people are still teaching 8088 processor when the RISC-V processor with quite different architectures are the thing today. So why are we not teaching them? Why should we be teaching the old stuff? So this whole process of changing the syllabus, managing things, etc., is something very unique. Now I want to share some examples. I think we have little time left. Let me quickly go through this interesting example which I told you earlier. While I was doing consulting, I came across a World Bank report, and I was surprised to find that World Bank report. I know some of the senior professors will agree with me that one of the watershed moments of India was the Green Revolution. We had a huge famine in the 60s, and then Norman Borlaug, C. Subramaniam, and others are credited with creating the Green Revolution. That a country of 1.3 billion people today is able to export food grain. Okay? That is the kind of green revolution that we saw. And then everybody thought it is a green revolution was because of science. And this is how it was. This World Bank report, it changed that perspective for me. It said the green revolution succeeded simply because Indira Gandhi nationalized the banks. That was something quite difficult for me to understand. Then when I really read it, I realized that basically what they were saying was that although you may have the technology, the way it got implemented was that today that whole farmers bill problem is quite complicated. The farmers bill that people are taking it so easily. Actually, what Indira Gandhi did was that she realized that the farmer was not able to make profit, or the farmer was not getting credit on time, because all the credit that the banks and other lending institutions were going to industry or going to others, and the country was being, sort of pushed into famine and drought. So she really nationalized all the big banks and put a target of 40% priority sector lending as a target for these banks. And then the pawnbrokers who were lending to these farmers, they were out of business. and slowly the farmers were able to get the loans and manage their farms and so on. That was phenomenal. For me, it was a very interesting insight that I got. The next example is the National Family Planning Program. Here, again, another World Bank report which said that the National Family Planning Program was the largest, longest, and most expensive policy blunder of the government of India. Again, it was a stunning thing to say. And they said, why this happened? Why the government of India was not able to achieve its goal of controlling the population with this? Simply because of very poor urban and rural sanitation. Okay. Another insight. I couldn't understand what is the connection between the two. What they said was that when a couple, you know, gets married and they are trying to build a family and a future, they are having children as an insurance for their future. If the child mortality is very high, they are not sure whether the children will survive when they are born. So they don't take bets on one or two children, and they have three or four children, irrespective of what the government says. So you can make a policy at the highest level and put a lot of budget for that, but as long as you don't fix the issue, so when the urban and rural sanitation is very bad, the child mortality is very high. No child survives beyond 1 year. So why will a parent, stop with one child? How will they stop? Today, the situation is different. Today, we have good urban and rural sanitation. As a result, child mortality rates have fallen. If you see all the indicators, that is why nobody is having more than two children. But in those days, this was a failure. So these are the point that I'm trying to make here is that a lot of knowledge is needed to understand something, the root cause of that, and try to connect things. And in order to be able to draw such inferences, you need phenomenal learning capabilities. You need phenomenal information management capabilities, and so on. Another report that I read, this was sometime, in the 90s, I think. This is a report which says that 90% of women in developing countries spend 90% of their time in just two activities: collecting water and collecting firewood. So the World Bank report wanted to know water waste. Why is the world wasting 50% of humanity on such stupid, mundane things? Why can't we make energy and water available to people at home? And why are we not creating policies and budgets for that? This is another example. Now I'll come to the one which I referred to earlier. So we had our survey results showing that teaching, reading, writing, and arithmetic are all very easy. Okay? Our, first director in charge, Mr. Kohli, who passed away last year in September, he had an insight. Okay? I think some of you may know. So he was looking at the National Literacy Mission, which was geared for adult education. He said that he found that there was a Pareto principle applying there. 80%, I mean, you spend 20% of the effort to teach people to read, but you spent 80% effort to teach people to write. The benefit of reading was 80% with 20% effort, but the benefit of writing was only 20% with 80% effort. So he, in the TCS adult literacy program, he removed writing. He said, you just teach reading to people. If you are able to teach a person to read, nobody can cheat him. He can read his newspaper, he can read his card, he can read the bus numbers, and that will tremendously improve his standard of living or his quality of life. That was a fantastic insight which we implemented big measure throughout many of our programs. The next one is the Insight program. This is also an interesting program. Now, here is a program which actually taps on the motivation of people. The TCS did an experiment. It selected 2,000 students from the poorest echelons of the society, from the remotest part of the world, and gave them an offer that they could not refuse, which means that they gave them a stipend, they brought them to a hostel, they put them into learning coding, and they promised that if they do well, they will be taken into TCS. These students had such a high gradient of rewards versus and recognition versus performance that they outperformed many of the people that we took from some of the best institutes. These youngsters, they did so well. Today I see that in some of the reports in Delhi, Kejriwal has changed the education in corporation schools. The corporation schools are showing 98% results in board exams. I think the motivation for people who are deprived is much, much higher. And that is something that can be tapped once you create the right kind of process for them. That's the TCS Insight program. Another example is the Fox and the Hedgehog program. This is a program which was run by BBC. The BBC in 2008 or 10, they started a long research project. The project was, trying to figure out how people are learning or behaving in the internet era. So they took a 1,000-member sample, which is stratified according to gender, age, location, language, etc., throughout the world. And they found that broadly people fell into two categories. The first category was the hedgehog category, and the second category was the fox category. The hedgehog category, what a hedgehog is actually some kind of a porcupine type of thing. What it does is, that if it wants to eat, it will come out of its hole, look for food. Wherever the food is available, get the food, come back to its hole and eat. Okay, or eat there and come back. Every time it goes somewhere, it will come back. Now, the behavior noticed of older generation people when they went to the internet. They will always go back to home. They visit a site, come back. Visit a site, come back. The younger generation, on the other hand, was behaving like a fox. It went wherever, whatever was available. So the fox will always go to some place, eat there, and then go to the next place to eat. It won't come back to home, etc. So that is the behavior they found among youngsters, and that really shows how they take to TikTok and Snapchat and Instagram, and make videos and do all kinds of new things without bothering about what is the base code, what is the data structure, what is this, what is that. Nothing. They just go on with whatever is available to them. Okay, so the way the learning process changed because of internet was this. This is the BBC case that. So I have a few suggestions. I will quickly scan through the rest. So basically, so here I want to really sum up, what I wanted to convey from all this. So I tried to. I mean, I was sort of in the past almost a decade. I've been following most of the things in artificial intelligence, robotics, and machine learning, and I was trying to understand. So the basic question was, if I have to teach a robo a trick, I am expected to have tons of curated data, okay? Tons of data that is with what you call properly cleaned and fed to that robo to learn a small trick. Then how come a child which just talks to its mother with so few information, so few words, is able to so quickly grasp a language, so quickly communicate, so quickly learn things with so little data. How is the child able to do that? Why is the computer taking so much effort or so much data? That is something that people are now really talking about. I think it's extremely important for us to understand learning from those principles. I think we are today. I also understand that people are questioning the whole process of science. Is this the way science has so far stood us in good stead? But we don't think science is able to answer many questions. So, do we really have to change the way of the scientific thinking or the scientific thinking? Uh, I think I read one interesting sentence in Twitter today, which said that trying to be science has ruined psychology. Okay? Which means that there are many areas or disciplines of knowledge which probably need something different from science. So we have to really keep our minds open to understand how something needs to be learned or how it needs to be taught or what is it that we need to use to convey the right impression or perspective to people. That requires a lot of creativity, and that requires that our teachers have to be sort of relieved of many of their responsibilities and allow them to only talk about how will they convey something in such a way that their student gets the right kind of input for them to grow further. And that is something which is happening in the case of learning. And the way it is happening is as follows. If you talk about a B.Ed education or some educational, education about education or pedagogy, it was mostly based on the practice of teaching, how it is being taught, how it is being learned, etc. And now we are coming from a different side. We are seeing that we are trying to teach a robot and we are trying to learn how a child is learning. And we are trying to figure out if I can train a robot to become conscious and artificially intelligent, then what we need to do with our people. Okay, how do we have to learn? So we come from the other side. We come from the machine side of learning and see how we can improve our own learning methods as human beings. Because if the humans have to control these machines which are reaching singularity, we are coming to a stage where they are really going to surpass human capabilities, and there's so much fear in that. They have to be smarter than the machines, and they have to learn things differently based on these experiences. So I had to suggest that the teacher should first benchmark himself or herself to the best in class in the country or globally. Take a sabbatical to an Indian or a foreign university. I think that is the message I want to give to most of the institutions. You should send your teacher to a sabbatical to a foreign university just to understand how they value learning and teaching quite differently from ours, and then bring back that knowledge and that competence to be used here. Next point, I would like all the teachers to be basically grounded on research. They must be doing work research in the areas of their specialization, because the output of that research will become the content for the teaching for them, and that's the way they can set new syllabus, create new things, etc. Lastly, they need to really network with industry and businesses to familiarize how their teaching is impacting the students. And that is something which in IEEE I'm seeing it in a big way. I can see. I mean, I found that even within the same college or same university, the faculties are operating in such silos that some of the methods that are followed, for example, in computer science or ECE, are not followed in mechanical engineering or civil engineering. They don't seem to have learning there. So if there is no learning happening within the institute, it's quite difficult to do it from outside. So there is a need for this interaction to happen. Of course, COVID-19, I don't want to talk about it because I think you guys have much more understanding of gone through this whole thing. I've added a few slides on learning which you can go through. I think I'll leave it with this and open it up for questions. I've given you a lot of references. Of course, this is the last sentence. This is an interesting poem that I came across. Uh, it's a very old poem of the say, 19th century. Lord, who am I to teach the way to little children day by day, so prone myself to go astray? I teach them knowledge, but I know how faint they flicker and how low the candles of my knowledge glow. I teach them power to will and do, but only now to learn anew my own great weakness through and through. I teach them love for all mankind and all God's creatures, but I find my love comes lagging far behind. Lord, if their guide I still must be, so let the little children see the teachers leaning hard on me. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I'm now open for questions.
Thank you so much, sir. I request Dr. Vaibhav, sir, Chairman, Department of Electronics and Communication Engineering, to please moderate the question and answer session.
Yeah, thank you, Jessel ma'am. Um, uh, Mr. Rangarajan, sir, can we take up the questions, sir? I have
Yes,
the
yes.
questions from, so I'm reading out the questions. I would request you to please kindly answer the questions. So one question is from Mr. Athiya Raj. He's saying, good
Yes.
evening, sir. My question is on about, are we born as a teachers or become teachers? These days, I think there are multiple questions in one question. The first question I think is is on about, are we born as a teachers or become teachers later?
Well, I think it is the concept of a teacher being born is slowly fading away. The amount of knowledge and the domain, the space of domain has become so huge that it is very difficult to be born with that knowledge, in your head. You have to acquire it. So you really have to have a proper process of becoming a teacher, which requires a lot of commitment and interest. So my answer is that teacher has to be made.
Thank you, sir. Another question is from Shashi Dharan Prabhu. He's asking, for exams and tests, one has to adhere by timelines and remember, that means memorize, which does not allow to learn exhaustively. But the future depends on the exam marks. So learning is reducing day by day since there are many tests and students are busy in preparing for test one after another. So I think in a nutshell, his question is there. Shall we go for the remembering or shall we go for a creative type of questions?
Well, I think here what I would like to say is that I do understand the constraints that teachers are operating, because there are so many agencies which are creating your template for teaching and template for exams, template for answers, etc. But I think if you can really kindle the curiosity of the child to be able to learn something while following the pro forma that is prescribed by these agencies, that would be a great service. I mean, all of us have come to the same grind. We have also fulfilled all these regulations and we have come out of it.
Yes.
But we are sometimes exposed to some environments which make us very curious, and which keeps that the heart and mind of a child in us, the curiosity of the child to explore, to have some kind of a rigor in our exploration, understand the real meaning of what the society is going through and what is expected of us, and not really bother about these structures that are being created. Of course, these structures will get changed over a period of time, But with the time that you have, you can kindle the spirit of inquiry and curiosity and the scientific temper in the child. I don't know how you do it. I mean, I'm not going to solve that problem for you, but that is the essence that we have. All of us have come across teachers who have done that to us. That's the kind of expectation that I think we should have. We can always find fault with why we are not able to do this, but that's the reason.
Very true, sir. So next question is from Jasma ma'am, and so it's quite interesting. She's asking, dear sir, do you feel that the current way we are educating children fully prepares them for the need of 21st century?
No, I don't think we are preparing them for the 21st century, because I think the fundamental difference is that we have to teach a child to explore, to learn, to look at things. I think the focus has to change from securing marks to solving problems. The way you do it is that you don't denigrate the first. Marks are important. We all know there is so much competition. Unless you get marks, you cannot get those opportunities that you are seeking. But you should remember that it is not the rote learning in the school which is going to help you. It is your curiosity, it is your scientific temper, it is your ability to focus on a problem, identify a problem, and have the tenacity to solve it and perseverance to solve it in the right way, which is going to be the hallmark of your success.
Thank you, sir. Sir, the next question is from a student. He's saying, sir, the evaluation of the education industry has not been in par with the development of other industries. He's saying education as the industry good. What do you think should we inculcate to evolve education today?
Well, I think if we are able to measure, I saw one big difference when I think UGC or AICT, I don't know who it was, they started telling you that you need to have an outcome-based education or outcome-based process, and they are trying to measure that outcome. The more you align yourself with the needs of the society, I'm not talking about industry alone, even research. I mean, we need, I am seeing that future is of research. People are going to be enormously, large numbers required in research. I could see that you look at this vaccine development last year, governments have poured billions of dollars into this. Who do you think has got all that money? It is the researchers in the labs. Most every country has poured billions of dollars in this research, and we have so many hundred odd vaccines are coming up, and people are talking about how to safeguard our future if such attacks happen, which are unknown earlier. So there is a lot of effort going on research, and it is such a marvelous thing that we were able to create a vaccine and administer it to the whole world within 1 year. Okay? Imagine the speed at which this whole thing was done. That is phenomenal, actually, which means that the world has now developed the capability of solving such catastrophic things, with the help of science in such a way. I could see the amount of data that was being captured, the data that was being analyzed, the data that was being used by the clinical practice, the data that was being used by regulators. The amount of work that was going into this is phenomenal, and we have not stopped. You are going to see some few decades of output from this coronavirus. So, so the whole shift is going to be on academics and learning and domain and research, and this is the way it's going to be. Most of the physical tasks will get automated. Okay? Just imagine, today you are not expected to go out of the house at all. Your food, your day, the grocery comes home. Your, you have machines to work. You used to spend, a whole family used to work on all these things. And they only, today, one or two people are able to run a household. So with so much of automation that is happening and being in a business taking it up, you are going to be left free to do a lot of work in the research area, try to solve problems. And people are, so one big difference I saw between the Indians and the developed countries is that the developed countries are always looking for problems. If you can really throw a problem, they will be grateful to you. They're looking for problems to solve. We in India, we seem to have so many problems that we are not bothered about it. Just like how we have so many people, we are not bothered about people. We have problems, we are not bothered about problems. Whereas there they have less people and less problems, so they are always looking for more people and more problems.
Thank you, sir. Sir, we have next question from Dr. Sanjay Chitnis, Professor and HOD, Computer Science Department. Sir is asking, what is your opinion on liberal studies, specifically applied to the engineering?
Once upon a time, a person was called a Bachelor of Arts. That was the only degree. Engineering, etc., came much later. The original baccalaureate degree was Bachelor of Arts. And if you are a BA, which was very rare in villages in those days, you were considered a highly literate person. And liberal education was considered the education. That was the education which made you more civilized. Rest of the disciplines which emerged, they all emerged because of commerce and because of investment and such things. But basically, liberal arts, even today, I would say art is superior to science because art is something which, we are imagining and we are creating. Today, I don't know whether you heard of this NFT, non fungible token. That is the latest asset class which is being sold in the market, in financial market, and that is being sold for rare art. Most of the art is being sold as NFT token. So people are, they know that the creation of the liberal arts are the higher level thing. The only problem with liberal arts is that the market is very small for it. The number of people who can afford and engage them is small. There is going to be a time when all this education will get organized in such a way that there will be no differentiation. Everybody will be expected to know things, and liberal arts will find its due place. But I remember at least 70, 80 years ago, it was arts which was dominating compared to science.
Thank you, sir. Sir, our Deshmukh sir, Dean of Basic Sciences, had said a heartiest congratulations to you for capturing the essence of teaching, and he's conveyed here. Thank you message to you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
I think there are no more questions. Just a moment. Over
Yes,
to you.
sir.
I
Thank
thank
you so much.
Dr. Rangarajan sir for his discussion. It was not a presentation, but it was like a discussion. He has shared his experience, and over to you, just.
Thank you
Thank you,
very
sir.
much, Vaibhav, for conducting the question and answer session. And I'm at a loss because this was such a brilliant talk from Professor Rangarajan, and something which we all needed to hear. Um, so we are very grateful to you, Rangarajan sir, for this marvelous talk, very thought-provoking. It has been guiding, uh, it has so many guiding principles for all teachers, and the interconnections between teaching and learning that you brought about so beautifully, uh, to find motivation in research, to learn more so that you know what is the right thing to be taught. So there are some very great ideas that you brought out. We're very grateful to you. And thanks also to my good friend Arvind Srinivas, because it is due to Srinivas that we have the good fortune of having you, Amidas, this afternoon. So thanks to both of you. And I really think that the interconnections between teaching and learning, your thoughts on whether a teacher is born or made, and you very categorically gave an answer to that. And I was wondering if there was enough time, you would certainly elaborate as to how a teacher is made and highlight that the teacher's role himself, he himself has to take the responsibility in making him a good teacher. Because unless he learns more and figures out for himself that he is, his course would stand anywhere in the world in the best of institutions, unless he makes that course that good, I don't think a teacher can be made unless he puts in that effort for himself. And I think you brought it out very beautifully. So thanks to you, Rangarajan sir, for such an excellent talk. Thanks also to Bytes and to Dayanand Sagar University, to Professor Murthy for spearheading this program of the distinguished guest lectures. We have had a brilliant talk this afternoon. Thanks to Jasma, who coordinated it so beautifully. And thanks to all of you. Is there anything you want to add, Jasma?
Oh, sir, thank you so much for your kind acceptance to propose the vote of thanks and introduce the speaker. Thank you so much.
Good. So I guess we are ready to leave the meeting, and with the fond hope that we will have Professor Rangarajan amongst us sometime soon for a person-to-person talk, if and when it is possible. And if not, on any medium, it will always be an honor and a privilege to listen to you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much,
Thank
sir.
you so much,
Thank you,
sir.
Rangarajan sir. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you,
It was an
Rangarajan.
excellent lecture.
Thank you.
Super.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Have a nice day. Bye.